How are you? Yeah. It's so good to be with you. If this is your first time with us, man, you are absolutely crazy for coming out on a day like this. But we love you, all right? We live in middle America, and what else is there? So it's so good to be with you. As Amy already mentioned, we're in this series, 5 Easy Ways to Wreck Your Life. And we're going to get around in a moment to that. But before we do, got some great news to share. And I shared it with many of you in a note that I write every week for our community. And we shared it across our social media platforms. But want to tell you because it's kind of an exciting thing about where we're going in the days ahead. But many of you, I'll set it up this way, many of you have been so patient. Some of you not so much, but many of you have been so patient in waiting for the last 4 years to hear what we're going to do about this building, right? And this gym, believe it or not, was supposed to be a few-year solution. It's probably turned into about a 10-year solution, and that's okay because we're having a great time. But in the days ahead, we're going to be expanding our facilities, and we're going to be adding an 850-seat auditorium, and we're going to be expanding our children's ministry spaces by repurposing many of our existing spaces and kind of blowing up our atrium and lobby to make more space for new guests and for you as well. Really, we care about the new guests, right? Like if you're a follower of Jesus, you just kind of get tight, all right? And but if you don't know Jesus, right, these kind of places can be a little bit intimidating and a little crammed with crowds, and so we care about that, so we want to expand our space. And here's the deal with buildings. I know you know this, and so I'm just going to say it because I know you know it, but buildings are never the vision, right? You know that. Like, building is never the mission. A building can be a great tool to accomplish a mission, but a building is never the end in and of itself, right? Jesus said you build a building, it's going to fall down eventually. So don't put your heart into something that's going to fall down. However, if you love Jesus, you're part of this community, you know that God has a way of using facilities or working through facilities to bring people together and to bring about life change. And so additional facility spaces for us just means more guests walking through our doors. It means more open seats for the friends and neighbors that you're praying for and you're inviting. It means more opportunities for our kids to grow up, and we believe every one of our kids are world changers, and so it's more space for them to be able to do that joyfully. And we're going to invite you along in this journey. Some of you hearing this for the first time, but we just ask you to be patient in between now and the fall. We did move through the process of contracting with the local designer and architect, and so by the fall, we should have a plan in hand for what this thing's going to look like, and then we're going to talk about where we go from there, okay? But we'll be giving you a lot of updates in between now and then, and I just, on behalf of our leadership, say thank you for your support and prayer through this, and we love you, and we're grateful to be a part of this with you. Okay? We good? We're good. All right, at least 3 of us are. Let's go into Ecclesiastes, okay? And we're going to talk about ways to wreck your life. That's what we're doing in the series. How you wreck your family, how you wreck your future, how you wreck your home, how you wreck your marriage. Aren't you glad you came? Any of you glad you came? And we're looking at a journal from the man named Solomon, who wrote in our Bible in the Old Testament about his life. Now here's the deal. Solomon, when he was a young man, was blessed by God with wisdom. In fact, he wrote 2 other books in the Bible for us, the book of Proverbs, which is filled with insight and instruction on how to live God's way joyfully. So, Song of Solomon is a book that describes this love journey between a man and a woman, and it talks about how to do relationships God's way. It's this kind of ravishing celebration of love and romance and sex and marriage, and it's beautiful. But by the time that Solomon gets older in life, he took a number of paths that led him away from God's plan for his life, and at the end of life, he says, man, don't wreck your life the way that I did. You know, I had wisdom, but I traded it in. Don't wreck your family like I did. Don't wreck your nation like I did. You know, many of us don't have a nation, so don't wreck your home. Don't wreck your community in the way that I did. Don't do it. And last week we said that the first way to let kind of life wreck you or to wreck your life is to let pleasure guide you. And today we're going to look at a second way to wreck our lives, and here it is. You want to wreck your life, you want to let success consume you. Let success consume you. Let me ask you for a moment, can succeeding at something really wreck your life? Can it? Well, some of you, if you're like me, you're already pushing back and saying, Jed, are you really telling me that winning at something, that succeeding, that being great at something can really wreck my life? And I would give a counter argument. I'd say the Bible in many ways celebrates success. It's filled with men and women who were great at what they did and brought glory to God in that process. So on one hand, success can be a wonderful thing, but we also know that success can have a darker side, can it? I mean, this drive for success in us begins when we were young. Many of us had these infatuations, these dreams, sort of irrational dreams of being great at something. Maybe you wanted to be, the next president of the United States. Or maybe you wanted to be the next, Paul McCartney, Phil. I'm in my mind, I'm like, it's not Phil, it's Paul, all right? And his brother Phil. You wanted to be his brother Phil. I know it, see? Some of you want to be a next great athlete, or you wanted to be something, and you set your mind on that, right? You know what I wanted to be growing up? I wanted to be the Hulk, all right? I just saw a guy over here, he goes, really? He's looking at me. I mean, I know many of you think I'm Hulk material, but he, for whatever reason, that didn't connect with him. And Bruce Banner, my brother and I both wanted to be the Hulk, and so we would dress up like Bruce Banner, and we'd put a flannel on, and we'd button that baby up all the way to the top, and then we'd get really angry. We'd start to throw things, and then we'd rip our shirts apart and throw them on the ground and have dreams of being great. I don't know what you wanted to be, but our irrational dreams of success as children have a way of developing into and morphing into just more adult-like versions of success, to where we want to be great. We might moderate those a little bit so they don't sound so ridiculous, but there's something in our heart that still longs for greatness. And here's the thing about success. Don't miss this. It's not wrong to work hard at school or to be the top of your field or to achieve or to make the team you want to make or to win in your industry. None of that is life-wrecking. In fact, we'll see today that I believe hard work is both a gift from God and can be used for His glory. But here's the nuance you need to catch. Sometimes success at a good thing can make you drift from the best thing. Sometimes success at a good thing can make you drift from the best thing. Matt Bortmus, our executive pastor, who is just such a dear friend. Many of you may or may not realize that Matt and I, our story goes back a long time, and he and his wife, Linda, were very instrumental in my wife's, Beth, faith in Christ. She came back to faith as a high schooler, in part and mostly because of their relationship and ministry. Matt did our wedding. He invited us out to New England, where we did ministry alongside one another for many years. It was a no-brainer for me when I came here to at least invite him. God wooed him, but I invited him. And so we've just been in the trenches in life together a lot. I've learned a lot from Matt. I owe a lot to Matt in life. I love the stories he tells about ministry, and I learned from them. One of those is of a time when he was leading high school students actually here in Omaha, and he took many of them to the Rocky Mountains to do a moderate climb. They were out there for a conference, but they were doing a climb one day, and so he takes 50 students and leaders. And they take this climb, and they get to the top of the mountain. And Matt, one of the things you got to know about Matt is he's a highly organized guy. I mean, like, he organizes his sock drawer, color coordinated by code. Okay, no one does that, all right? I'm just like lucky. Beth told me the other day, you're lucky to get everything in your drawer. Kind of like some of you are married to that person, right? But Matt not only closes his drawer, he color coordinates his sock drawer. And so that's the kind of guy he is. So you can imagine as he leads students, he has a system. He's very organized. So he says, okay, I've got a buddy system. You got to climb with 2 or 3 people. So everyone gets to the top, and they're all in their buddy groups. And there they are. They're just loving the view, and it's beautiful, and they're singing songs, and they're enjoying God's creation. And then he starts to send them down, and he says, okay, you got to stay with your groups. So everyone begins their descent, and it's this beautiful descent, and they get to the bottom, and Matt does a head count, and he took 50 up, and he only brought 49 back, okay? And here's the deal. When you lose a kid, no one goes, that's okay, you got 49 out of 50, all right? No one's like that. 98% attrition's not bad, okay? No, it was chaos. You want to start a small group, just lose a child, okay? And all of a sudden, people start forming small groups. Everyone's praying. You got girls off to the side weeping. You got leaders kind of chasing down the mountain. It's total chaos. Long story short, Sandy was okay. What had happened at the top of the mountain is Sandy and her buddy group, I love it. He's such an organized guy. He calls it buddy groups. I love it. At the top, they start their descent, and the girls that she was with were just a little quicker than Sandy. And so they went one way, they were just barely out of sight, and she thought they went the other way. So they went right, she went left, as you can imagine, and she didn't know she had taken the wrong path. It was a slow drift, but it was a drift that ultimately led her to the complete opposite side of the mountain. Hours later, after searching, calling the rescue patrols, rangers going through the mountains, they get a call from a couple, fortunately a nice couple, not like the couple you see in the movies, a nice couple, okay, that took Sandy in, and they loved Sandy, and they called up and said, "We've got the girl that was missing." Here's the crazy thing. Sandy didn't even know she was lost. She thought she was on the right path. But it was a slow drift of a path that took her far from where she wanted to go. And success is very much the same thing. You can succeed in life believing you're succeeding at the right things, only to wake up one day and realize that the path you succeeded at, in fact, took you far from the life that you wanted to live, the path you wanted to travel. And it happens in life in all areas of our lives. For many of us, it happens with our kids. As parents, maybe as a father, you don't see them a lot because you're working, and in your mind, you're working to provide for their family. When you're not working, you're out with your buddies, spending time with them, you're golfing, you're hunting, whatever it is, and your kids clamor for your time. They long to be with you, and in your mind, you think, "Oh, one day I'll spend time with you." Maybe you tell them that. And you believe that you will, but then you wake up one day and that day has gone. Because you drifted from the desires you have, believing the path you were taking would ultimately give you what you're wanting. It happens in marriage. We start off in marriage with a big flame, but before long, things begin to douse that flame. We have schedules and work and commitments and responsibilities, and we travel and we go here and there, and we say, one day we'll connect at a heart level. One day we'll fan back into flame the romance we once had. One day we'll be great friends again. And we say it, but what happens in the name of whatever it is for you, money, pleasure, the pursuit of your own roads of happiness, we wake up one day and we realize we've drifted far apart. Is that true? It happens in our relationship with Jesus. We love Jesus. We want to pursue him. But before long, we get distracted and disconnected, and we stop residing with him, abiding in him and his word. We stop connecting with him through prayer. We stop bringing other followers of Jesus around us to encourage. And then one day we wake up and we find that we're no longer living as generously as we'd like to live, and no longer loving our neighbors in the way we'd like to love them. And we just find that, and we would say it this way, we just feel far from God. We feel distant from him. We've drifted. And we never intend to make this drift. We take the paths we believe life should take us on, but sometimes we just get on the wrong path, and it happens because we're pursuing some version of success we believe will give our hearts what we really long for. And Solomon talks about this in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, beginning in verse 17. He says, "So I came to hate life." Okay, Solomon's not a positive guy. So if you need positive, okay, wait just a little while. But here's where he begins. "I came to hate life because everything done here under the sun is so troubling." Everything's meaningless. Like chasing the wind. He says, "I came to hate all my hard work here on earth, for I must leave to others everything I have earned." Some of you have experienced that. He says, "And who can tell whether my successors will be wise or foolish, yet they will control everything I gained by my skill and hard work under the sun." How meaningless. Now, Solomon first says, I worked hard. We've already established that working hard can be a good thing. At the same time, you can pour some of your best energy into your work, believing that your work will pour itself back into your heart and fill you. And it rarely does. Solomon says, I worked hard and I gave everything to my work and my industry and my organization and my kingdom. And then I woke up one day to realize I had to hand the keys to the kingdom to someone else. You know, many of us don't have a kingdom. But one day, bro, you're going to walk out of your corner office. They're going to take your little name plaque out, throw you a party with a stapler, and they're going to put someone else's name tag in and go, good job, thanks for your 30 years. They give you a little 2-month severance and call it a go. And you walk out, and all those years you invested in that work that you depended on filling your heart with some sort of joy, some sort of satisfaction that would sustain you. All of a sudden you wake up and like Solomon, you say, wait, was all of that worth it? Like, did it really give me what I anticipated it would? Did it really satisfy? Solomon says, I came to see that work is good, but pursuing work as a god is meaningless. Work can be joy, but believing that work will satisfy my heart all the days of my life is like chasing the wind. He goes on, verse 22. So what do people get in this life for all their hard work and anxiety? It says their days of labor are filled with pain and grief. Some of you are like, he must have had my job, okay? All pain and grief. Even at night, their minds cannot rest. It is all meaningless. He says, I pursued success, and it worked for a while. Listen, it worked for a while. Some of you are saying the same thing, but it's working. Or it worked for a while. But Solomon, at the end of his day, says, yeah, it worked, but it didn't last. You know, Tom Brady for the New England Patriots is, some of you are laughing, you're like, where is he going? Are you serious? Probably the greatest quarterback, maybe of all time. I can't even believe I'm saying this, but the statistics prove it true. I'm actually going somewhere with this, okay? Jeez, you guys are so cynical. You know, he's won 5 Super Bowls. Probably should have been 6, but this year the Eagles deflated their footballs, okay? I know it's true. No. After he won the 3rd Super Bowl out of 5, he was interviewed by 60 Minutes. And he was asked about his success and what it's done in his life. Brady's response is fantastic and yet heartbreaking. It teaches us so much, and yet it's so difficult. Brady said, I'm making more money than I thought I ever could playing football. Why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still there's something greater for me? I mean, maybe a lot of people would say, hey man, that's what it is. I mean, he's wealthy, he's married to a beautiful woman, he's been successful in his work, everybody knows his name. One guy in Iowa likes him. I mean, it's all good. He says, I reached my goal, my dream, my life. Me, I think, it's got to be more than this. That's interesting. I mean, this can't be what it's all cracked up to be. So the interviewer looks at him and says, well, then tell us what it is. What's the answer? And Brady responded, I wish I knew. I wish I knew. Like Solomon, he says, you know, success can leave you empty. In and of itself, the trophies and the titles and the corner offices and the fat portfolios and the jets and everything can be great for a moment, but they'll never satisfy eternally. Success can move from becoming a great thing to becoming a life-changing and heartbreaking thing when you believe a single lie. And with our time, I want to look at this one lie together, and I want to look at one truth that I want to encourage you to begin to believe. But here's the lie that many of us today believe, and many of us are chasing, and on any given Monday morning, we can wake up believing, all of us. Here's the lie. Many of us believe that my success defines my identity. My success defines my identity. Who I am equates to what I do. Which is why when guys get together, what's the first question we ask one another? What do you do? Because we believe the lie that what we do determines who we are. And when you believe this lie, three things will happen in your life. Number one, you will be consumed by winning. You'll be consumed by winning. Solomon, when he began to chase success, his identity was no longer as a man loved by God, blessed by God, chosen by God, used by God. His success was as the king. His identity became being the man. He was wealthy. He was attractive. He was strong. He was desirable. Everybody wanted to be around him. And he began to become so infatuated with that he sold out his life to that. And once again, we don't have kingdoms, but we follow much the same pattern. We think if I can just be successful at work, then I'll be seen as important. If I can be successful at school, people will respect me. My peers will like me. If I can make a lot of money, this is what many of us believe today, then I'll be secure. If I can be beautiful, then young men will desire me. If I can be strong, young women will want to be with me. Many of us, this is maybe the most tragic, are living our lives through our kids, and we think if my kids can be what I wasn't, if my kids can be successful at sports because I wasn't, I was mediocre. If my kids can be successful academically because I was just average, then I'll be something. Then our family will be important. Some of you today are living your dream vicariously through your child, and not only is your heart crushed because you never reached it, you're going to crush them in the process. You have a version of success that's driving you to be consumed by winning, and when you believe that success defines who you are, the only choice is to win, because if you fail, you're no one. So you're committed to winning. Number two, you get caught in a comparison trap. And man, isn't it so easy to play the comparison game? Your neighbor gets a 60-inch LED 4K Ultra HD, okay? And what do you have to have? 72. Right? He gets a fishing dinghy, you go outboard. He goes outboard, you go inboard, right? He goes inboard, you go platoon boat, right? That's what it is, not a platoon boat. I suppose there are those as well. A platoon boat, right? And you're just constantly chasing that thing. He gets a Honda, you got to have what? You got to have an Acura, right? She has two kids. I love this one, and this is so true. Ladies, you look at another gal, she has 2 kids, you have 1, you want 2. She has 3, you want 3. She has 4, you just say good luck, right? And you're like, all right, better woman, you got me on that one. I can say that because we have 5, all right? We were chasing some people and they just outran us. We're so insecure we think we have to have certain accomplishments or status symbols to prop us up and make us something, because we believe that what we do or what we have is who we are. And we get in this mad scramble to prove that we're significant. Solomon talked about this in chapter 4. Verse 4, he said, I observed that most people are motivated to success because they envy their neighbors. Isn't that interesting? He coined the idea of keeping up with the Joneses. He says, but this too is meaningless. When comparison and envy start to drive us, we start living in, as one author calls it, the land of Ur. The land of Ur. You say that with me? Ur. See that? Ur. Now let's do it together on the count of 3, right? 1, 2, 3. Ur. Now we're going to do it till we get it, man. Like 12 of you are like, are you kidding me? He's having us say Ur. I am, and I have all day, okay? So let's do this. Here we go, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Ur. Right? You live in the land of Ur, meaning you don't just need to be smart, you got to be smarter. You don't just have to be pretty, you got to be prettier. You don't have to just be successful, you got to be more successful, right? It's not even a word. I can't believe you did that. You have to be well-to-do, rich. You just got to be richer, not cool, but cooler. And Solomon says, hey, listen, it's a dead end. It's a meaningless pursuit, and it will never take you where your heart wants to go. If you believe success defines who you are, you'll get caught in a comparison trap. You'll be consumed by winning. And number 3, you will ultimately compromise your character. And that's what he did. Solomon. In the same way, if you believe that It's so important to succeed that you're willing to cheat or lie or steal or muse or abuse or misuse someone to get to the top. All in the name of the bottom line, all in the name of succeeding, all in the name of greatness. It may work for a moment, but it will ultimately undo your life. It will lead to a lot of pain, and it will steal your identity as a man or a woman or a young person created in the image of God, loved unconditionally by God, pursued by the one who made you and longs to be with you. And so here's what this means for us. For anyone today who's pursuing success with all that you are, for anyone who's running after success in hopes of escaping insignificance, for some of us who are trying to please mom and dad, still trying even though they've been gone for a long time, for those of us who in your mind wake up thinking these thoughts, I'll never be smart enough, never be successful enough, never be wealthy enough, never be secure enough, never be good looking enough. If that's you today, I want to share a truth with you that I believe can completely change the way that you live life. And here it is. The lie is that success defines who you are. The truth is that your identity defines your success. Your identity determines your success. Let me ask you this morning, how do you define your identity? Where do you get your significance from? This week I was struck by a truth in John 3:16, and I probably have read this verse more than twice, okay? But this particular time, I read across it, and a word stuck out to me that I had noticed before, but had never really noticed. In John 3, the author says, "For God loved the world so much that he gave his one and only Son." So much. Let me ask you, how much did God love the world? So much. How much? So much. I thought about that. I love my kids. I love them so much. I tell them all the time. And for me, really, at the end of the day, for Beth and I, success in parenting is if our kids are secure in our love. Everything will flow from that. If they believe at the core of who we are, that we love them unconditionally. The gospel writer John says that God loves you so much that he was willing to lay down the life of his only Son. You are worth the death, the resurrection, the blood, sweat, tears of the life of his only Son. And on the cross, Jesus laid down what was dear to him to wrap you up in his arms and call you dear to him. He forgave you completely. He called you a son or a daughter. He wants nothing more than to be reunited with you. That scripture goes on to say, for everyone who believes, places their trust in Jesus, God will give you life that satisfies. The Bible calls it eternal life. It begins today and it goes on into eternity. And when the truth of that love begins to get deep into your heart, it will change you. And you will, for the first time, perhaps see that you are not what you do, you are not what you have, you are not how you look, but you are important because of whose you are. You belong to the eternal King who from the day you breathed your first breath has been on your heels to bring you back into his arms and call you his own. Let me ask you, if he believes you're that significant, then can anything in this life render you insignificant? If he thinks you're that worthwhile, can anything in this life take away your value? No, because he's for you. So let me ask you this morning, what are you living for? Are you living for things that matter? Are you living for things that are valuable? Are you giving your life to things that not only matter today, but will far outlive you? You say, well, how do I know? Let me break it down for you. I owe so much of this series to a friend of mine and a great leader who's in Anaheim. His name's Gene Apple. He helped inspire this series and so much of the thought behind it. And he's a great leader. He tells a story of being at a time management seminar over 20 years ago. He was with 100 people in the crowd, and the kind of orchestrator for this seminar was trying to teach people about priorities, what you give your life to. So he looked out at the crowd and he said, I want you to imagine with me that across this stage, and so you can begin to imagine, was a 140-foot I-beam, 9 inches wide, 12 inches suspended off the ground. He looked at the crowd and he said, I want you to imagine that I was on one side of the I-beam, 140 feet across from the other side. He said, if I were to stand on that side and you were on the other, if I offered you a $100 bill, how many of you would run across that I-beam for $100? Everybody in the crowd raised their hands. Of course. He said, how about for 1,000? Well, of course, if we do it for 100, we do it. He said, well, how about if we got a helicopter and suspended that I-beam up in between, at that time was the World Trade Center, 138 feet across. We suspended it at the very top. You know, at that altitude, wind is blowing, sleet, a little bit rain. And there it is, the I-beam's shifting a little bit, sagging in the middle. He said, how many of you would come across the I-beam for a $100 bill? No one, of course. He said, how about for 1,000? No one in the audience would do it. He said, 10,000? No one would do it for 10,000. Some of you are like eating ramen. Some of our college students, you're like, I would think about it. I would actually do that for $10,000. Then he looked at a woman in the crowd and he said to her, he said, woman, he didn't say woman, I suppose. That would be awful. She slapped him right across the cheek. She said, okay, please forgive me. Let's keep talking. That was all embellished on my part. He said, young woman, he said, do you have a child? She said, yeah. Are you a mom? Yeah, I do have a 2-year-old. He said to her, imagine that your 2-year-old was on the other end of the beam. Would you run across the beam to rescue your 2-year-old? How about you moms in here? Yeah, would do that. And then he looked out at the crowd. I love this quote. And he said to them, what you're willing to walk across the I-beam for tells you what your priorities are. What you're willing to cross the I-beam for tells you what your priorities are. And I'd ask you today, what are you willing to cross the I-beam for? What are you willing to give your life for? I've thought about that, and I've dialogued, with Gene, kind of been thinking through this, and I agree with him. He says there's 3 things that I would cross that I-beam for, and I agree. In my life, I've tried to organize my life around these 3 things. Number 1, he says I would cross my I-beam for any member of my family, and I would too, and I assume many of you would. For Beth, Jaron, Brooks, Carly, Elise, Lydia, any one of them on the other side, I would walk across. He says, I would walk across to follow God if he called me across. In the same way, I want to, in my life, pursue the things that Jesus calls me to. I want my life to make much of him, and if he calls me across an I-beam, I've got to assume he's got my life in his hands. Number 3, I would walk across the I-beam for any man or woman or young person who is far from God and has yet to taste Jesus' goodness. If there's somebody on the other side whose eternity is hanging in the balance, we're all going to spend eternity somewhere, who has yet to encounter Jesus and say yes to him, I would walk across to rescue them. For a follower of Jesus whose eternity is secure in Jesus, I don't know if I'd walk across. Maybe. But if someone's on the other side, I most certainly would if they don't yet know Jesus. And that's what I want my life to be about. That's what this church is about. We are crazy in this church for helping people find their way back to God because God did so much to help us find our way back to him. And he says in the same way, commit your lives to my mission. And so I would do that. But I'd ask you this morning, what would you commit your life to? What would you give your life for? Are you living today around the priorities that God's heart cares for? Or have you somehow inadvertently drifted from the more important things in life? Have you drifted from the gift of family? Have you drifted from the gift of your marriage? Have you drifted from the gift of living generously and hospitably? Have you drifted from the gift of radical obedience to Jesus in your life? Or are you walking with him and letting him carve your path and measure success and determine your identity as his son or daughter? As you consider that, I just want you to consider this. Great leaders are leaders, great people. People who walk paths of success are people who say no to a lot more than they say yes to. You know that, right? Great leaders are great eliminators. And I want my life to be a life that's about a few great things, not a lot of good things. Because you can chase a lot of good things and find yourself on a path that's not so great. And you can wreck your life. And Solomon says, don't do it. It's not worth it. So I want to pray with you, and I want to lead you through a prayer where you just interact with Jesus where you're at, quietly. And so I'd invite you to bow your heads with me. I just want you to interact with him. Have a dialogue, conversation. We call it prayer. Where you just invite him in to begin to assess the priorities of your heart and ask him, Jesus, today, would you help me identify what is most important to me? What's most important to me? What I'm giving my life for. Jesus, point out the areas of our lives where we're investing the majority of our resources, the majority of our energy, the majority of our time. Because those things betray the affections of our heart. Jesus, point that out to me. And will you just have a conversation with him? And if you see that you're chasing success, would you confess that to him right now? Would you say, Jesus, would you just reignite my heart for you? Would you give me wisdom to walk with you? Would you give me a delight as I pursue you? Just talk with him about that. Maybe today, for some of us, the decision we would make is to, for the first time, place our lives in the hands of Jesus. We'd trust him for the first time. We'd put our life in his hands. We've been living for a lot of things, maybe success, maybe a number of other things. But today we see that there is one who loves us as we are and calls us his own. So will you go to him if that's your desire? Jesus, I give my life to you. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for giving your life. Thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for calling me your own. And if that's your decision, we want to be part of your story. Here in a little while, we'll tell you, you can mark that connection card that you were given and you can drop it in the offering plate as it passes. We just want to be part of your story and encourage you. But for now, we want to close, Father, and we want to say, teach us how to live our lives secure in knowing that we are yours. You have established our identity once and for all on the cross of Christ. You gave your life to give us life. So we receive that right now and pray that you would shape our lives according to that truth. Jesus, we pray. In your name, pray together.